It's 1:15. Thank you for staying on for Press Pass. This is what we have lined up for you.
Intruding into private conversations, among the people of Kenya is a total and white lie.
Communications Authority strongly opposes media reports that the government intends to spy on Kenyans through their mobile phones. Well, since that, implementation of the device management system has been suspended following a successful petition by human rights activist Okia Omtata. Let's meet the panel for tonight real quick before we start the conversation. Patrick Gathara, he is right next to me here, has been here for many episodes, and tonight, of course, as an analyst in his capacity and concern for what touches the Kenyans, he will be sharing his thoughts. Next to him is Christopher Kemei. He is the director at the Communications Authority, director in charge specifically of licensing and standards as well as compliance. And next to him is Okoth, Edwin. He is a senior reporter with the Business Daily. He was one of the journalists on Friday of last week who broke the story that got a lot of response, especially from the regulator, and has been following through Saturday and Sunday if you've been following through with the Nation. And next to him is Alex Gakuru. He is the chairman of the ICT Association of Kenya, a stakeholder definitely in this particular conversation and has been watching the development. So let's just set the tone here. The Communications Authority of Kenya has defended itself against the accusations that it intends to spy on Kenyans on behalf of the executive. Through Director General Engineer Francis Wangusi, the authority says that the device management system, what we will be referring to during this program as DMS, they intend to install will only protect consumers and not spy on them, since it does not touch on content. Well, Wangusi has blamed telecoms of misinforming the public. The 200 million shilling project is meant to be implemented during this financial year. And as Ken Mijungu reported on Friday, not everybody seems to believe the Communications Authority.
Intruding into private conversations, among the people of Kenya is a total and white lie.
The reason the Director General woke up to a foul mood is media reports suggesting that the Communication Authority is up to no good with their planned compulsory installation of what is known as device management system on facilities owned by mobile phone service providers.
That the system will be extracting subscriber data for use by third parties. We are not interested in that.
The fear shared among telecoms and communicated to the public yesterday by one of the leading providers is that the gadget the government intends to use will enable it spy through tapping of telephone conversations, reading text messages and monitoring financial transactions.
You can imagine, with over 35 million subscribers, generating over 33 billion talk minutes on our networks. Who will have the time to go and listen and mine the SMS information, and for what purpose? CA itself, as an authority, has a paltry staff of around 247 people dealing with different aspects of ICT. Where are we going to get those millions or thousands of staff to be able to do that, and for what purpose?
But the Communication Authority says the intention is to protect the consumer first, through keeping out of the network counterfeit devices, stolen devices, SIM boxes, and those that have not been type approved by the authority. Wangusi blames the misinformation on telephone service providers, who he accuses of having ulterior motives by releasing confidential information without giving clear information.
So for them to be able to provide a schematic diagram that misleads Kenyans to think that we are putting props to be able to enter into this, what we call SIM card toolkit of the operator, of the subscribers, to mine information from there, is as false as any liar that you can ever come across in this world.
If installed, the monitoring begins as soon as next week. Even with all these explanations and the assurances, there's still reasons to worry now that the telcos, the owners of these networks, are the ones who are raising the red flag. The Kenya Human Rights Commission is among organizations that do not believe the Communication Authority's explanations, making the same accusations against the Communication Authority, quoting Safaricom, which kicked up the storm. KHRC says this is an infringement of the rights of individuals. Article 31D of the Constitution expressly provides the right of privacy for all Kenyans. The Commission wants all telcos to resist the attempt.
We are also taking exceptional concern on the operators on this particular issue.
And that's not all. Activist Okia Mutata has gone to court asking the Constitutional Court to quash the directives from the Communication Authority of Kenya and to issue an injunction stopping the installation of the devices temporarily. The petition will be heard before the Constitutional Division of the High Court on Monday morning. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
And this particular case was heard, and this afternoon, Justice J.M. Mativu from the High Court gave his ruling on the matter and suspended the implementation of the DMS until the hearing and determination of this case, a hearing which has been set for 6th March 2017. That will be 2 Mondays from now. Let's start the conversation, and actually you can join us. I invite you to do so online. Kelvin already writes, with this government, man, you never know. It's time we go back to Simu ya Jamii. Well, this is just some of the responses that we welcome. Just keep them coming in as we get the responses from our panel here. Bona Christopher Kemei, you're in charge of licensing standards and compliance. With the report, of course, there's a lot that's been said about fake news. Of course, we know by who, that is Trump. Is this a case of fake news?
I hope so. Thanks, Mark. I think it's important that we really set the record straight. Let me start, Mark, by stating clearly that the Communications Authority of Kenya is mandated to protect consumers in very many ways. In this particular issue, you may be aware that the law prescribes that every device, every user device, requires to be type approved. In other words, to the process of ensuring that it conforms with the set standards. And there are many reasons why that is important. One, for example, is that if a device is not of the right standard, it shall not be able to interoperate with other devices or other network or work well with the rest of the network. Number two is that it might also create or cause interference, frequency interference. And frequency interference is a very serious matter because it then renders the communication networks completely useless if there is interference. As you know, even in this studio, whenever there is interference, you know what havoc it can wreak. Secondly, or rather thirdly, we also do that for purposes of protecting consumers because certain devices are actually as dangerous as... You must have heard stories about people getting hurt because the devices that they've used just explode because the battery, standard is not up to speed and stuff like that.
So what you are saying is basically you are protecting Kenyans. So
the whole essence of type approval is to protect consumers.
All right.
Protect Kenyans.
So these reports that were out.
Now, the thing, Mark, is that this issue is not a new issue. Way back in about 5-6 years back, we were at the same issue where, together with the industry and consumer organizations, we sat down and all agreed that we need to rid the menace of counterfeit from our markets because of many reasons. And I need not elaborate on the reasons. I think all of us agree that counterfeits, in addition to the fact that most of them do not meet the standards and it causes so many technical problems, that we generally need to ensure that our markets are gotten rid of, counterfeits are gotten rid of from our market. So what we did as a first step, is to set up a system. First of all, we did a public awareness, a major public awareness campaign about counterfeits, why they are dangerous, why they should not be used. Then we went ahead again together with the industry as well as consumer organizations, and I think Alex was involved in that process. We set up a system which helps you to verify your answer as to whether it is counterfeit or not.
So what's different with that system and the DMS?
Yes, I'm getting to that. Now, that system has worked up to now, because even now, when you send your email to 1555, you can actually get information.
So it's not obsolete?
It's not obsolete. It is,
why
it is still
don't we continue
operational
with this one?
Now, the problem, Mark, is that at that particular point in time, we also recognize that there are cloned emails. There are cloned answers. In other words, there are counterfeit answers that mimic a genuine one. They have serial numbers of another a genuine answer with a counterfeit answer. They share the same email, so you are unable to tell.
Yeah. You've made a good case in terms of counterfeits, and I think all the gentlemen here and the people who are watching are in agreement that no one wants counterfeits. It's bad for business. Correct. It's bad for your safety. It's not what is welcome in the market. From where you're seated as the chair of the ICT Association of Kenya, are you concerned with the latest reports, or is there something that needs to be disputed in what has been out?
I'm not worried at all. In fact, I'm so happy that this is being implemented, because over 7 years ago, start asking the regulator why they are not implementing this. In fact, there is something more. We also have been asking them for the last 6 years to implement something called do not disturb. Right. That is, all these crap SMSs we get from operators, sometimes coming from the network themselves. I want to put my number somewhere at a database managed by the regulator, and all these marketing and what have you, disturbance SMSs, which they have sold our contacts to these marketers, that is not there. So it's a secondary database we want to have. The reason why it needs to be held by the regulator is so that all operators can query that database, find out if my number is there. But let me not go to that second one. Let me start with the first one that's here. I want, when I lose a phone, that phone is unusable in Kenya. There is no point for any operator to have ill-gotten gains because of the traffic they are making through stolen devices. And I have a very sad story that happened last week on Saturday. So I welcome the move, and I also worry, and I'm disappointed that the people that broke out this news, brought it out, are not on part of this conversation. I was really hoping they would be here so that we have a big conversation, so Kenyans can have all points of view, so that we don't have accusatory, where we have. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah, well, we have someone who's interacted with those that have broken the news and been accused of misinformation. Edwin Okoth, from the response that the government gave, this is hours after the papers went out on Friday at around midday. They called a press briefing, and there was this very strong response in saying that this is lies, and nothing else but lies. What's your response in this, and your analysis of the response that has been coming?
Yeah, you put me in between people who support the whole idea. I'm almost falling to the trap of saying... You'll
be protected, don't worry.
But either way, that response was expected when the DG said that they're not spying on people's conversations. That was obviously expected. Mark, this is a very technical matter, and majority of Kenyans will not understand what actually is happening in the interlinks that are created. The fight for fakes is in the DMS, well provided for. But inside the same DMS, there are so many other provisions, some of which, and I can point out two, which directly provides a loophole for spying. That's where the worry is, and the worry of introducing a third-party provider in between the mobile operators and the regulator. Those are where the issues are. Okay.
Some quick responses. I also invite Gathara's input here. Songi Anam says, CA guys are evading the questions. Counterfeits can be dealt with at importation level. You'll address that. Eric M. Mugambi says, I think the CA team is just playing grammar. The spying really needs to be fully addressed. And someone else also asks to be explained to as a child how the DMS works. Patrick, in the response, and as you followed this particular story.
Well, I think for me the failure is on several levels. I think first is a media failure in terms of articulating and explaining to guys what it is we are talking about. We have reduced, as has happened in many cases and in many lots of reporting on other issues, to he said, she said sort of situation where the CA will say no, it has no capacity to spy, etc. And Eric will come and say, well, actually no, or the telcos will say no, it does. But the public is left in the middle without, without the ability to take a stand. And I think it's important for the media to actually break it down, to explain this is how the system works. This is what they're actually putting in, you know, etc. I think the second failure for me is on the CA's part, on the government's part, in terms of being proactively going out to inform people, to actually get their consent for this system. It's all good to have what they call stakeholders, but the number one stakeholder is your public. And the public have very good reason to fear their government. You know, it's behaved pretty badly in the past. You know, that's why it's very credible for them when they hear that, oh, there's a potential for spying, to think, well, actually that's something we really need to be careful about. You know, and I think it's very reasonable for people to have that sort of reaction. So if government hasn't come out from the very beginning to include this public and to say, this is what we are doing, these are the safeguards we are putting in, you know, etc. This is how you can hold us accountable in case something goes wrong. I think if they don't go forward and do that, then there's a problem. Finally, I'll say that there is a sense in which, and I've seen the sort of instrumentalization of the talk of security. You know, I think even the CA mentioned it in its statement. Right. You know, where we're being told, in essence, that for us to get security, we need to accept a certain level of surveillance, you know, a certain level of giving up certain rights to whether it's privacy, expression, etc. That for me is quite scary, because these cameras are only turned on us. They're never turned on the very people who are telling us we need to give them up. So we don't have cameras, for example, in police stations. We don't have cameras in State House that allow us to monitor what the president does or what the police do, etc. You know, the other day we had, what's it called, like chiefs. So calling up people to tell them to register. How they got people's numbers, etc., is something that the CA has not come out and explained. Well, actually, how is this? So if they are setting themselves up as these protectors of the consumer, why is it they're not protecting us from the abuses that are performed by their own government? You know, so I think there is a level at which people are quite justified in being skeptical. Right. When government says no, we have no intention of surveillance. Another level of skepticism is, Edwin, you would tell us, as you've interacted with your sources, again, the telcos, that they would actually, it would be in their interest to see that counterfeits are fought in terms of business. So this narrative that is being brought here, he's shaking his head, he'll tell us why. This narrative that is being brought here that they're actually misinforming the public. What interest would they have to misinform the public? Is there something they're fighting in this implementation of the DMS?
I will not want to speak for the operators. Right. But let us look at the facts as they are. Fakes have been fought before. And in 2012, you will agree with me, they switched off about 1.5 million devices, without necessarily coming with all this elaborate DMS they're bringing now. And the fights against fakes, even the operators suffer when they have fakes in the market, because a fake phone will probably not browse as fast as it should be, and that means you consume less data, and that means they get less revenue. A fake phone might not be able to give the quality service that they have guaranteed. So CA punishes them for not giving quality service. Last year they paid 190 million shillings for not giving quality service. I don't think they will not want to fight fakes because they are hurt as well. Yes. But not to speak for them, the person at the center of it all is the consumer. He mentioned the consumer 5 times in his when he first started talking. He mentioned consumer, consumer, consumer. And that's where the conversation should center. Why is the consumer being introduced at the end of the process?
If indeed they are stakeholders.
Yes.
Right. Well, he's been part of this. Real quick, because I have to.
Absolutely. I mean, the question, you have just mentioned some data of what happened in the first phase when the fake counterfeit phones were blocked for the first time, how many millions? But today, out of these 33 or 36 million subscribers, how many of these are not only just fake, but they are products of the thefts? And the moment they are switched off tomorrow, is it 50% that are going to be switched off, because we want to render even stolen ones, not just fake, unusable in Kenya.
Well, in the short term, it might be bad seemingly for business, but in the long run,
it's good
quality products for everyone.
Quality products.
Yes,
they have to go down, and it's also be good for business. But then, how many of these corporations were they happy when the 1-point-something million are switched off? So maybe this time around, maybe 10 million. Every viewer has had their phone stolen, or they know somebody whose phone has been stolen, and we are saying it's time we cut this out, and we want the regulator through their network of operators in East Africa to share that database with all the operators in East Africa, so that phone is unusable throughout East Africa.
Okay,
thank you.
I think we're in agreement with that. Real quick before I take a
Mike, let me just intervene. Stolen phones is a different case. If a phone is stolen now and you report the IMEI to a police station and it is given to a subscriber, they are able to blacklist it.
Yes.
So matters of stolen phones do not come at the center of this.
Okay. All right. Thank you for
I
that.
think we need to be careful when we speak of the numbers. We speak of 50%, 10 million phones. All this is, to me, sounds like scaremongering. If we know, if the CA has figures about how many phones are out there that are counterfeit, then it should give those figures, and we should discuss on the basis of those, not on us speculating how many there may or might not be.
Eric Mugambi, you say the CA is actually not clear on what they are up to, so they have failed big time. Hopefully he'll get an opportunity to explain how this DMS works in terms of protecting you. As they say, it's not on spying on Kenyans. Stay with me now. As I mentioned earlier in the first part, that is the High Court through Justice J.M. Mativo has certified as urgent the case filed by human rights activist Okiya Mtata challenging the implementation of the device management system. And this means that the implementation of the system has been suspended and will not take effect starting tomorrow, Tuesday, February 21st, as was the intention. The Communications Authority had contracted the Broadband Communications to fix the gadgets at the heart of 3 telco companies. The Communications Authority will not be able to do this pending the hearing and determination of the case. And this has been set, the hearing I mean, for Monday, 6th March. So, Bwana Kemei, following this ruling from the High Court, what is your next course of action? Of course, you're not going to be implementing this starting tomorrow, as was the case.
Of course, we can't do that. We have to obey the court orders. Obviously, our intention was to, explain ourselves. Somebody mentioned earlier that perhaps we are not proactive. Actually, the challenge was that we had a plan to have an extensive public awareness as a process, part of the implementation of this system. But for some reason, and in fact, all the operators are members of these committees, including the public awareness, and everything was programmed. But somebody just decided to preempt, the whole thing and present it in the manner that it was presented.
You're saying somebody. Of course, you're talking about the telcos, and
I
guess you're not able to mention them. But
yes,
then at the heart of this is that there's some infighting, or within the industry, that there's some rebellion against this implementation of the device management system.
With hindsight, it would appear that perhaps somebody is not very happy about it. As Alex has probably mentioned, I don't know the reason. Probably is right as to why they want to fight it.
If indeed it is as you painted, to fight counterfeits,
yes,
isn't it in their interest to welcome this?
I thought so,
even though initially they will lose some numbers.
I thought so as well. So maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe we are not communicating properly, Mark.
Right.
Just according to the law, that is Section 25 of the Kenya Information and Communications Act, no operator can be provided spectrum unless they give the regulator unfettered access to their system to ensure that the type approval compliance is there. Right. Kenya Information and Communications Act, Kenya. Now, to counter the same menace, you look at what is called the Wireless Telephone Protection Act of 1998 in the US. There is UK Mobile Telephone Reprogramming Act that all deal with these numbers that we are dealing with. So at an international level, for those who want international best practice, because everything done is not right, there are cases you can see. So the issue here is very simple. It's just been blown out of proportions.
Well, you speak of something, you know, the regulator has the access to the industry players, but I guess the question that is being raised here is whether it has the right to infringe on the privacy of the Kenyan. And I think
not. I don't agree they have the right to
Edwin
infringe.
has a point there, as you were talking about that.
Yeah, they don't have a right, and as you say, the regulator accessing the system of the service providers. Right. In this case, there is the regulator. There is a third party called Broadband Communications Limited.
That was contracted.
That's where the other issue comes in. And then in this whole system, there is the access of information on, for example, billing. If you look at the whole structure, they want to know the billing. They want to know, you know, you will have to send SMSs to their system when you want to pair your SIM card and the mobile phone you have, so that the IMEI is directly attached to one SIM card.
Right.
You see, now in that whole transaction, if you really want to fight fakes, why do you want to know my billing? And in billing, when I send an SMS and you have access to the billing, then it means you know how much I was charged, you know who I sent it to, and you know where the location where I am while sending it, and you know the location of the receiver whom I am sending the SMS to. Now, if that is leaked to a third party, how can the operator guarantee my privacy? When they can't, they will say, well, we are three of us. So the consumer is at the middle of a triangle of three people able to handle some sensitive data that they are not even aware of. Apparently, they were to be told after the system has been set up.
Right. Isn't this something worth looking into in terms of answering that question?
There is a problem. There is a presumption that the way the news was broken out, that's the truth. So we are starting to argue from there.
That's why we have you here, in case
and then I'm Kenya Human Rights Commissioner, people worked for over the years. Their reactions, I tend to think, is because of lack of the depth of the information and understanding. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the operators will be querying a database hosted by CA, which has a white list of the numbers which are valid. And if anybody tries to activate a number that is not within this white listed numbers per the press statement, that phone is not activated on the network. The rest of mobile location, it's now we are starting from that point of view. I think this is fear mongering that has been led to create that fear.
Gathara and then Kemei.
Okay, two things. First, what Mr. Kemei said is a bit concerning. They say there is a public awareness campaign that was planned. But if you are rolling this thing out tomorrow, or are you simply going to inform us after the fact?
Tomorrow.
Well, it's not tomorrow because it has been stopped.
It's been, yeah, but I mean, now that seemed to have been the plan. So why? Yeah, it should have preceded. It should have been explained before. And if I've misunderstood, you will explain. So for me, it seems to me it's sort of being presented as a fait accompli. You know, it's here now. We're going to tell you about it, but it's already there. You know, the second thing is I think we have to be careful when we start saying that telcos or private companies will not stand in the way of their own interest. I know we've had an example here with our media houses when the digital migration thing was being introduced, where they acted in, I think, a really atrocious way. You know, so I won't dismiss out of hand the idea that telcos might be misbehaving. You know, I think it all boils down again to the fact that we don't have the information, that we don't have the clarity about what is actually going on. And if the CA and or the other stakeholders were able to get together and actually explain, this is what the system does. You know, who has access actually to my SMS and to the data that Eric is talking about? You know, who's got access to it? The CA says we don't, telcos say they do, you know. So that needs to be articulated. And that, if we could have that clearly so we know where are the gaps, you know, where are the dangers? And then we can ask, okay, what have you done to mitigate those dangers if there are any? You know, because data such as location, etc., as you've spoken, is quite sensitive data, and I think you would all agree. Right. You know, and it's got to be limited who has got access to it, and it's got to be really regulated and looked at what they actually do with it. And as I've said before, that our system has seemed to be quite carefree in dealing with people's numbers, you know, as you've said, spam marketers seem to be easily, to easily be able to acquire them. Our very own government, its agents, chiefs and staff seem to be able to access, our data and our numbers when they need to prod us to go and register in Jubilee areas. So I think we need to be, we've got a real serious problem, a real serious concern when it comes to whether the CA is actually interested in protecting consumers, or it's doing this for other reasons.
Something that Edwin has brought up, and I think it's worth mentioning. Someone would say we wouldn't be talking about this hadn't it been broken by the various media houses that did. It was on several dailies and also on TV stations. Perhaps we've helped you in the public participation, because as he has raised, if in this process the public needed to know what is being implemented and they only know at the point of implementation, then there was a miscalculation on your part.
Not
or deliberate
yes, Mark, but not in the appropriate manner, because the way this information has been presented to the public, to be quite honest with you, is extremely misleading. Let me just explain something. The issue of having a third party in between, I don't know where it came from and for what purpose. But
wouldn't broadband communications be...
Broadband communication is merely a local partner of the vendor that is coming to implement. The system will be owned and managed by the CA, the Communications Authority of Kenya. But like, if you buy an equipment here, Mark, from Sony, for example, wouldn't you allow Sony to come and install it?
So CA will be maintaining everything?
Absolutely. So there's no question of a third party here. This is just,
So the 200 million shillings is going to installation?
Absolutely.
All right.
Right.
So let's get it right. So there is no third party. Secondly, what we are talking about here, Mark, is that we are developing a database. And the reason why we're developing a database, and I gave you the history, that we started in 2012. First of all, switching off, handsets that are clear. For example, the emails read 000 or XXX. Of course, those emails are not in conformance with the structure of GSMA.
Right.
So clearly it shows that it is fake. So we were able to identify those. But as I said earlier, there are still handsets that are cloned. In other words, people, even out here in town, are able to implant an email of a genuine handset.
All right.
All right. So how do you tell those? So there's a three data set that we wish to implement in the database. In other words, the IMSI, that is the International Mobile Subscriber Identity, which identifies the user with the service provider. And then there is the IMEI now, which International Mobile Equipment Identity, which is actually the serial number of the handset as given by GSMA. The third one is the Mobile Station International Subscriber Directory Identity, MSISDN.
All big names.
Yes.
Basically,
now,
in one word, data.
That is. So what I'm trying to say, when for example you switch on your phone, okay, the SIM, the email, and the IMSI are combined. So we will be able to tell that combination that on your phone is for Masai. Okay. If tomorrow somebody steals your phone and tries to put a SIM card, the system will say you will not be allowed service until you verify that handset is actually yours.
As it works right now, as I reported, it's switched off, no?
Yes. So because people can steal your phone and go and flash the email and look like it's a different handset. But if we associate those three data sets, it becomes very difficult to do that.
Bwana Kemei, let me just cut you short, because you've really been on the point of counterfeit and also just protecting the Kenyan. The lead diplomat, CK Sydney, asks, what does it do, bro? What does it do for me as a Kenyan?
Yes.
DMS.
Besides
counterfeit, because you've spoken about it at length, besides fighting counterfeits, what else does it do for the Kenyan?
It improves the general quality of service, number one. Because counterfeits have a tendency of, playing around with the spectrum, for example, in terms of occupying too much bandwidth that others need to use, for example, because it radiates beyond the limits that are expected. So again, you have this normal thing that causes interference, and it minimizes the capacities of the network. It makes it so difficult for the network providers to optimize their networks, for example. Secondly, if I protect you as a consumer from the potential, EMF radiation, which is known, if it exceeds certain levels, it can cause cancer.
Right. Is
that not a benefit for you? If I protect you from the potential explosion of an handset while you are talking, is that not a benefit to you? If I protect you from an handset that can explode in your car as you are driving, is that not a benefit to you? If I protect you from possibility that some handsets could even be mining, who knows? They are not standard. Who knows? They could be your information could be mined from somewhere else.
Right.
Am I not protecting? Is that not a benefit to you?
Okay. Bon Alex, and then Edwin.
For me, I'm happy at the outcome of the huge debate that has come out of it. It may not have come out giving the right information, but unlike him, I'm happy this has become a major debate, because the issue of privacy is not just as small as we're even thinking. It's opened other avenues where we need to wake up as a country and start discussing our privacy vis-a-vis various other systems, including international ones, Facebook, Google, Twitter. Start reviewing our policy and ask who protects our information. It has also raised questions about the legitimacy, the authenticity, and what the telcos themselves do as we question and probe what the government is doing. So to me, I'm so happy this conversation is taking place, because we have fought for so long to try and get even data protection laws passed in this country. It hasn't happened, but guided by Article 46, the Constitution of Kenya on Consumer Rights, which says the article applies to both public and private. So I think this conversation must have the private players involved, because consumers must have information that is necessary for them to make the right enjoyment of goods and services, whether they are private or public. So be it government, be the telcos, they must be here. We must know the information, what they are doing with our data, all of them, whether they are spying, whether they are selling our data, whatever they are doing, whether they are here or out there, and what measures are being done legally, policy, legally, and regulatory to protect us. Or are we just as vulnerable worldwide? So I'm happy with the discussion.
Well, are you happy at the public involvement in
this process?
Yes, that's precisely
what I'm saying.
Not as of now.
Yeah.
How it was before it was meant to be implemented on Tuesday, as the ICT Association
Consumer Association of Kenya.
Yes.
I think I'm happy that it has come to the fore. Whether you are going to look back
without this report.
His report has helped.
Yes.
Somehow, but then you know what? There's a
and hadn't it gone out, it would have continued.
But there's a problem. There's a problem which has plagued all this policy making and public participation. At the heart of it, all these things are no law will be valid unless public has been participated and involved. But then the Constitution never set the thresholds. I think it's now that so-called public participation is sort of being defined. So before, you could get government people calling some friends, then they say it's consultation. You could get some coming to nation. You'd say they have consulted. Others do newspapers. Right. But really, what is that consultation where you can have thresholds? So I don't want to sort of prejudge what the bill that is trying to come up with the parameters of what you can call genuine public participation. I do know I was involved. I was additional members for as many as 7 years ago. And as you can see, not only this, there should be a secondary one for do not disturb. But then the more they come on board, the more they give comments, it's never too late to get involved.
The service providers, Edwin, as they have been our source in this particular issue, then there must be another story told in terms of what could they be fighting, because it's also reported, even in part of the various reports that have been done, that they are considering a united front in terms of fighting this particular move. But in what Bon Kemei has mentioned, if it's a better service and, of course, fighting the counterfeits, Gathara has said, yes, they might actually fight this, but they would welcome better service and quality service to their consumers.
Indeed, they should. And for me, all that we are discussing on counterfeit is the sweet coating outside.
Right.
You remove that sweet coating and then the inner details emerge. I will be very happy if this system, as it is, was subjected to public scrutiny and put out there, and the diagram shown that this is how it works. On Friday, that's what I thought the press conference will be about. This is how it works. It doesn't touch this, It doesn't touch that. But again, you see, the licensees who are licensed by the regulator to provide this network have signed to protect our privacy. Now, if a third party, which he now denies is not there, but I know I have the tender document here, and it specifies what that third party will do. If that third party is involved, then the network providers simply say, look, we are now 3. So you see, we'll open like hundreds of court cases. You know, my SMS was leaked. Safaricom, you are liable. Airtel, you must pay me. Then they say, look, we are 3 of us. So I think that's one noise they're trying to run away from.
Right.
And they are even in the communication that I have seen before I even wrote the article is that they were telling CA, why don't we have the DMS with you, without the third party? Query the number you want, whatever you want to query, we will be aware. So in case of any complaint, we say, look, on 18th of February, this is the CA queried this information. Because as I mentioned, SMS and the billing aspect of it is a red alert.
Right. And another red alert that people have raised, and some might say it's seemingly trivial, Koa Frederick he echoes this. I don't think the government is sincere with this move, just a ploy towards the general election. And this is something that we need to start and pick up with after we get back from the break. I have to take this quick break.